You're listening to The Last Thing I Wished I Said. I'm Linda Overman. The Last Thing I Wished I Said is a place to share that last conversation you wished you'd been able to have with a loved one, but were unable to. Each episode we talk to a different person who reveals their wished-for conversation with a loved one who they lost recently or long ago. Welcome to The Last Thing I Wished I Said.
Welcome to The Last Thing I Wished I Said. I'm Linda Overman, and we're here today with my colleague and friend, Professor Mary Marca. We both spent many years teaching at California State University, Northridge. Mary, luckily, is retired. I hope to be someday. Mary is a writer with many published works, and she'll tell us later in the show where those stories that are wonderful can be accessed. And Mary, welcome, and who are we having a conversation with today?
When you first asked me to do this, my husband had died 5 months before, and I naturally thought of my husband, except that his was a very peaceful death. We knew he was dying, and I was able to say many of the things that I wanted to say to him before he actually passed. However, years ago, as a matter of fact, 56 years ago, my mother died suddenly when I was 20 years old, and that shocked me profoundly. And there are many, many things I wish that I'd said to her at that time.
How old was your mother when she passed?
My mother was 53 years old. She was active. She had been to work that day. She came home. She was full of life, talking, and then she had a heart attack. So quite unexpected. And I was young, and we had no idea she was having a heart attack, and it was a shock to us all when she passed away.
What year was that exactly? Do you remember?
Yes, that was 1967 in January. We had been in California for just a few years. My background is I was born in England. And obviously my mother was born in Wales, actually. And then she moved to London and met my father, who'd come down from the north of England. And they were married in 1940, and I was born in 1946. So I was born after the war. But I grew up with many, many stories of World War II because they were in London during that time. So it was quite difficult for them. So we moved to Canada in 1956. We stayed there for 4 years, and then we moved to California for 1 year. And my mother was so homesick for her siblings that we went back, and we ended up staying for a full year, and then came back to California again. And shortly after that, I graduated from high school, went to San Fernando Valley State College, and then there I met my husband and was married shortly after that. So I married very young, had lots of babies very young, and we had to live in Italy for a year when I had 4 babies who were quite 5, 3, and 1.5.
Oh my! That's quite something to travel with that many children at that age.
Yeah, well, the best thing was we lived on a farm, and the farm was out in the middle of nowhere, and we had to pump water up to the roof to come down through a cistern into the. So yeah, it was quite a bit different. The best thing we did was get a washing machine, because washing diapers by hands was really quite difficult and annoying, and then the twins did toilet train themselves pretty quickly, so that was good.
So your mom was how old when she met your dad?
They were actually they knew each other from the church hall dances, and so she was 27 when they got married, and he was 26, a year younger.
And you're one of, is it 4 or?
Yes, I'm a middle child, a typical middle child. I had 2 older brothers and a younger sister.
And when your mother passed away, didn't you tell me that you had your firstborn at that time?
Yes, Paul was 7 months old when my mother passed away, and that he was my firstborn. And my husband, we lived in a triplex, and my mother and sister and visiting brother were in the front of the triplex, and my husband and I and my baby lived in the back unit. There was somebody else in the middle unit. And so when my mother was not feeling well, my sister came, knocked on the door and said, "Can you come? Mom's not feeling well." So I I did. I went up and we tried to see what we could do for her.
And this would have been, what was the year you said? I'm sorry, it was
1967.
So in those days, I mean, she didn't even know that she had a heart condition, or did she?
No. She was, she'd had some instances where she felt a little strange, but she went to the doctor. The doctor said, "You're fine." And about a week before, and so she'd gone to work, and she was full of, we're going to get the, she had a poodle, a purebred poodle. She was going to mate the poodle, and she was going to raise puppies, and she had all kinds of plans. and she was helping me with Paul, with my oldest. So
And he was how old at the time?
7 months.
Okay. So, and you were telling me that everything happened so quickly. What was when you realized she was unwell, what happened? What did she say? Or
Well, we thought she had the flu, so was not feeling well. So she said, she said, I'm feeling strange, and when I feel this strangeness, I just want to run away. And she said her fingers on her left hand were kind of numb, and her arm felt funny. And none of us understood that was a sign of a heart attack.
Oh,
So I called the doctor to get a call back. The doctor, to answering service, then forwarded a message on, and I was waiting for a call back from him to find out whether or not we should. These were danger signs, whether we should do anything. But I didn't hear from him until after I'd already called paramedics, because when she went unconscious, I called the paramedics.
And at that point, I remember we didn't have the 911 service. I think you just called the operator, right?
No, we had 911 service.
I couldn't remember if it was in the 60s or not.
Yeah.
I
No.
just don't remember it existing then. But and they came, but they determined she had already passed away. Is that right?
No, they didn't. They gave her oxygen, and they wheeled her out.
Oh,
And
wow.
I was saying, I went to the to the paramedics and said, quick, oxygen, because my brother was giving her mouth-to-mouth
Oh,
resuscitation.
that's right. We knew so little about the way women presented heart attack symptoms in those days. And when you said you thought she had the flu, that would not have been a surprise.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Because women present so differently, and that was never really determined until decades later.
Yes, and she was 53 and seemed in perfect health.
Yeah.
She was not overweight. She had, she didn't, as far as we knew, she didn't have high blood pressure. And they didn't check for cholesterol in those days either.
Oh, that's right. And she didn't smoke.
No, she didn't smoke. Not at that time.
Because, everybody smoked, it seems like in the 60s.
She had smoked at one point.
Sure.
But after she left my father, she didn't smoke. But she had a gin and tonic. She took one gin and tonic and sipped it through the entire evening. Just sort of what they did in the pub.
How ladylike. Right?
Yeah, well, when they went to pubs, this is what they did.
That's
in England.
lovely.
They didn't sock it down.
No, unfortunately, they didn't sock it down like some of us do, but never mind. We won't go into that. But did your mother have an established sort of career when she met your dad? Was she working in some field or?
No, this was the 1940s. In those days,
Right.
Most of the time, if a woman got married, she was expected to quit and stay home and
So
look after
odd,
babies.
isn't that?
Yeah. She got pregnant on her honeymoon, so she didn't have much choice.
Oh, it sounds like me, I think. But still, as you said, that idea that when you're working, if you got married, your career now is being a wife, which is
Right.
now is unthinkably. I mean, it's just not the way it is now, and it just seems so archaic,
Right.
in a way.
But there were some women who were doctors, but you had to have money
Yes.
in order to be able to afford to go to school.
Right.
And we were just plain middle class people. We weren't rich.
Well, like everyday people. And what's so lovely is you actually brought a letter that you crafted, that you've written to your mother, and I'd love you to share it if you wish.
Certainly. When you were talking about things I wish I've said, I came up with a whole bunch of things and then kind of refined it down. So I'll read the letter that I came up with. Dear Mom, sorry. I'm so very sorry. Thank you. Sorry for not knowing the signs of a heart attack. I was 20. I should have known. You were our anchor, our leader. You were our heart. How could yours fail? How could you be that vulnerable? You weren't supposed to be ill. You just worked a full day. You had plans for the future. You just begun to enjoy life again. How could we know you'd be gone in 40 minutes? Sorry for not insisting we drive you to the ER. You pointed out the numbness in your left arm, but we didn't understand what that meant. But neither did you. If only we had insisted, had driven, had placed you near a doctor, you might have stayed with us, enjoyed your freedom, fulfilled your plans, finished raising my sister. Sorry for not calling the paramedics sooner. We waited too long for the doctor's call back. You stopped breathing. Gordon tried mouth to mouth, and the paramedics brought oxygen, but it was too late. And I'm sorry, too, for not saying I love you enough. I hope you know how much I do, still, how much I relied on you, listened to you, honored you. But I wish I'd told you before you died. And thank you for showing me how much you loved me. As we moved from one country to another and from school to school, you pushed me to be brave, to face my fears, to step into unknown worlds, while you cheered me on. After we left England and left your brothers and sisters behind, you filled us with stories of your younger years, of leaving Cardiff in the middle of the night, of the struggle to survive the Depression, of your love and laughter even as bombs dropped on London. You shared your sorrow at losing the love of your life, yet you persevered. I learned from that. You supported me in whatever I wanted to try, working, college, marriage. Even though you didn't always understand my choices, you respected them. You showed me how to love my first baby, to stop worrying I'd hurt him somehow, gave me confidence I could manage. In those challenges of early motherhood, you reminded me not to neglect my husband, to appreciate my in-laws, to allow others to help me when I should. We didn't say I love you much in our family, but you showed it in your actions every day of our lives. You taught me that, and I tried to copy your example. Thank you for the stories and the laughter. Thank you for being strong even when it was hard. Thank you for your guidance. Thank you for setting a good example of living life well, of facing adversity with humor, of being useful, and always being kind. I'm forever grateful that you are my mother. I love you, Mary.
You've got me all choked up, sweetheart. I'm trying to keep myself together. That is so beautiful. You had said that you were able to, when your husband passed on, that you were able to write. I mean, as you know, when my daughter passed away, who you knew, I have not been able to write much. I finally was able to struggle and write a dialogue between us because I started imagining if we were talking, what we would be talking about. But still, you had said that you were writing in a journal when your husband was going through his struggles. I mean, with his illness, and you published those in your blog. And perhaps you might want to tell listeners where those beautiful reflections can be found. I think we were looking for them just before the show to make sure we had it correct.
Right. Well, the thing was, I could not do regular writing that I used to do of fiction and reflections on the world around us while my husband was ill. It was difficult. It was chemo for a year, and then he got worse, and then he died. And it was very, very hard for me to reach outside of myself and start writing anything that didn't have to do with him. So I turned to my journal to keep track of what I was feeling and to kind of have an outlet for myself, because with my husband I had to be strong, had to say, okay, yes, we're going to get a blood test, yes, we're going to get infusions, and he would say that it was terrible, but I let him make the choice. No matter what he wanted to do, whatever he wanted to do, I was with him, and I let him know that. So, and yes, I decided to share some of my journal rights, not all of them, but some of them, because maybe somebody else is going through it and feeling some of the same things I was. Joan Didion's book helped me a lot after my husband actually died. So I have a blog on Blogspot. It's Marca, helplessness-reflections-blogspot.
.com, I think, right?
.com, right.
And then you had published a number of short stories before he became ill. Do you want to share with listeners where those might be found online?
Well, Yellow Arrow Journal was one of them. Scarlet Leaf Review, Aerial Chart, Literary Yard, Writing in a Woman's Voice are just some of them. I have a website, marymarca7.wixsite.com/writer, where those lists can be found and links to them.
I'll be adding those in the show notes. As people might realize, I'm sort of new at podcasting, and so we were trying very hard to get the mic hooked up properly. So if you hear any movements, it's me moving the mic back and forth between Mary and I, because I haven't figured out how to do it any better yet, but I hope to.
Well, since the mic's on your side, Linda, why don't you share some of your dialogue with your daughter? I think that'd be very interesting.
You know, I have to say, listening to yours really has inspired me to share. I haven't really shared much of it with anyone. And last year, she would have turned 40. She died August 22nd, 2021 at 39. She had just turned 39, actually. So on her 40th birthday, that's when I sort of wrote an imaginary dialogue, which gave me the idea for this podcast. So I'll just do a quick excerpt because it's still in process. Okay, so I start out saying and my daughter's name was Deva, I start out saying, "You turned 40 today." And she answers, "I did, yes, if I was still alive." "Minor detail, darling." "Really, Mom?" "No, just kidding. What a year it has been, sweetheart." "Well, it was only just a year ago that I left." "Left is a benign way of putting it. What else would you call it? I died. You overdosed. So? So? Yes. So? Well, let me think. It was hard. Harder. Meaning? Stunned, shocked, devastated. Come on, Mom. Destroyed, shattered, gutted. For you and Daddy, confused, betrayed, drained. Expected the phone call. Empty, wounded, pained. Would. Abandoned, ambushed, overwhelmed. Come. Yes, but we prayed it wouldn't. But it did. Yes, God damn it, it did. It fucking did. Mom, wow, now you sound like me. I know. Is that a bad thing? No, but what? Well, it sounds awful. Those words sounded awful when you used to say them as a teenager. And that's sort of as far as I have gotten with any sense of comfort. But I have to admire the ability that you share, that you could write anything, because after I lost her, I just became sort of stultified. I couldn't really produce much. I was a journal writer just like you are. And it took me so long to process what had happened. I almost envy when you talk about the fact that you were with your husband through all the steps of the illness. I know was not a pretty thing by any means, knowing you as long as I have and knowing the suffering he went through.
Definitely.
But I find myself wishing I had had that time with my daughter, but, you know, she was a drug addict and we were estranged, and there was really no other way but to let her go and her addiction, when she refused to get help and she refused to leave the horrible person that she was living with that added to her drug addiction. So I'm so inspired by what you've just read about with your mom. Have you shared that with any of your siblings at all?
No, and not my children either. But just going back to yours, I really do admire the fact that you can the way you have tackled this, the dialogue is great because you're capturing her voice, knowing her as I did. You're capturing her voice, and I can quite understand you not wanting to write. I went through the same thing, and I just used the journal as my outlet. But I wasn't a regular journaler before that, and so it was something different for me to do. But the fact that you're now picking it up, I think, is great, and I cannot imagine what you went through with the drug addiction, and that's something that takes over somebody's life. That's awful. Mine was different. And having my husband here and being able to say goodbye properly was a great blessing to me. And as it was not for my mother, that was a dramatic wrench. They're both trauma. It's trauma either way if you lose somebody that you love. But I can't imagine yours because you had so much heartbreak before you lost her.
Yes, and of course you've known me long enough to know that journey, but it was almost like she had an illness in a way like your husband had an illness. And,
Right.
sometimes people accept treatment and sometimes people don't. And there's very little we can do to force the issue if it's not accepted. And I think, are we sitting in the room where your husband passed away?
I was.
Here?
No, we're not.
We're
No,
actually
no.
recording this in Mary's home. She was kind enough to let me come here and interview her in person. I still hope that our conversation, we're just two ordinary people, and this is my idea, was to just invite colleagues, friends, some friends I know, some are acquaintances, just to share these words that so many of us sometimes don't get to say to people that we love and lost, whether it's recently or long ago. And I hope that your letter inspires others to want to come on the show and do the same thing, and perhaps look and be able to say those final words that were not given an opportunity to be said.
I found it very cathartic too, because there was a lot that was bundled up inside of me that I've not been able to let out. And writing a letter, I used to write letters all the time. When we moved from England to Canada, I used to write to friends and I write to my aunts and uncles. And writing to my mother was a way for me to get out from inside me some of what I'd been feeling, some of that I didn't have a chance to say to her, which I think probably helped me when my husband was dying, that here I had a chance. I couldn't with my mother, I can with my husband. And I encourage anybody who has this kind of feeling to write down what you're feeling. It gets it out from inside you and puts it in black and white, and really, really helps. And I appreciate Linda giving me the opportunity to do this.
Well, thank you so much, Mary, for coming on. And this is our first episode, and I hope that I have many more. And all of you who are listening to The Last Thing I Wished I Said can find us on Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music. There's other directories. We're on Podcast Addict, Podchaser, Pocket Cast, Deezer, Player FM. And I look forward to the next show and all of you coming back and listening to us again. Thank you, Mary, and thank you again for sharing such a beautiful piece of work. And
thank you very much, Linda.